class who thought I was really cool. And I'm like, no one told me. Whatever, that's ancient history now. I dated 2 years in college. In the middle of the 2 years of dating in college, I discerned a vocation of the priesthood. So I was on the market for 2 years, and that was it. And the really interesting thing was that I didn't know any really nice Catholic girls until I got to the seminary, and then I got to the seminary, and I got to have this parade of phenomenal Catholic women. It was like God's continuous joke, like, you're not going to marry that one, you're not going to marry that one, you're not going to marry that one. I'm like, thank you, Lord, for torturing me now that I'm in the seminary. So most of what I know about dating and relationships is from doing marriage preparation, talking to married couples, and then especially in the course of the last 5 years, because when you do campus ministry, you're dealing with 18 to 22-year-olds, and it's a group of people I didn't know an awful lot about and didn't understand very much. And after 5 years of learning from the students at Christendom about what works and what doesn't work and what's disastrous and what's helpful and how do you make it look good and how do you... So right now I give more dating advice than I could possibly have imagined as a priest I would give out. When students come to make appointments, they're generally one of three kinds of appointments. The least common question is about spiritual direction. It's so interesting. They want to talk about everything but God. That's not totally true. It just feels like it sometimes. Then there's a whole bunch of students who want to talk because they have some emotional or psychological thing that they're struggling with. They're not really ready to go to see a counselor or a therapist. That's fine. So we chat instead. Realizing that was a pattern, a couple of years ago I went back to school, and a year ago I got a master's degree in developmental psychology, which helps in terms of this kind of stuff. It's not great to diagnose or treat, but it helps to kind of help people make sense of why people are the way they are. But it's a really interesting program of study. And then the questions that come up most frequently are what I refer to are dad questions. Questions that really, I would think, this is a conversation that you would have with your dad if you could, but either there isn't a good relationship with the dad, or the dad's not available, or I'm like temporarily like the dad substitute. But most of the conversations are actually dad conversations, and it's that context that the whole issue of dating, do we go ahead, do we not go ahead, do we break up, do we get together, do we get married, do we get engaged? That's an awful lot. So I've learned a ton from the students in the last 5 years. So to all of you that I've worked with at Christendom, thank you. You guys have been great. So my answers are on the bottom. That's why I don't concerned about you getting the right answer, not getting the right answer. It's more to put the whole discussion of dating in a context. Now, one huge problem is one of the things that you never, ever do. If you're ever asked to give a talk, so let's say when you get to college and you go to a high school and you're asked to give a talk to high school students, and they ask you to give a talk on relationships, one of the rules that you should absolutely put down is that you will never give a talk on dating and relationships to a mixed group of men and women together. It's a disaster, okay? So, this is a bad idea, but we're doing it anyway, okay? Because the whole issue of dating and relationships and romance and all of that stuff is so emotionally charged. It's just so much easier if you pull all the girls into one setting and pull all the guys into another setting, and the conversation tends to go much better then. So acknowledging the difficulty, that's why I thought something like this really silly instrument of a quiz, because it gets you to think about this a little bit without actually having to say a word. Okay? So if we look at the first two questions, I just want to go through this. If we look at the first two questions, what does the world say about the purpose of life is, and what does God say the purpose of life is? Okay? Why would those two questions be at the beginning on a talk on dating and relationships? Why does that possibly matter? Yes?
Because of vocations?
Vocations has something to do with it, yes?
Because depending on the purpose of your life, that's how you live it.
Right, so depending on the purpose of your life, it's how you live it. Why? What else is relevant?
Humans are oriented toward their end, even if they don't recognize it, and if you don't know what the purpose of your life is, you're...
So use a term other than end, because it makes it sound like we're oriented toward death.
People partially. Or
No, go ahead.
You're oriented toward what your goal is, what your purpose is, what you're created for.
Right.
And it is different what the world says and what the church says. But you have to know where you're going, or you're just wandering around lost without, if you don't know where the destination is.
All right, so or the word that I would use is that we're all, whether we realize it or not, moving towards some sort of fulfillment. Okay? And if I realize it, then I can make decisions based upon it. If I don't realize it, then I get lost. So those two basic questions, one is actually from the Catechism, the old Baltimore Catechism answer. Go ahead.
To know, love, and serve Him in this world.
That's what I
so we can
wrote
be
down.
happy
Let's
in
go.
the next.
Yes, right. And I deliberately paraphrased it and made it shorter than that. I apologize.
I know you.
Right. But it really matters because when your great-grandparents, so my grandparents, were actually, if your great-grandparents would be like my parents, because I'm an old man at this point. I turned 60 this year, it's so cool. Yes, I've made it this far. They lived in a world that was basically a Christian world. And they didn't have to think very hard about morality or dating or relationships or marriage or parenting or anything like that. They could just kind of look around and go, well, we're going to be married the way everybody else is married. We're going to have relationships the way everybody else has relationships. We're going to raise our kids the way everybody else raises their kids, and everybody's okay. Then they messed it all up. This is a little bit of history. They messed it all up with this thing called the Industrial Revolution, that's even further back, and then the post-World War II economic boom, and they created this fantastic world that you live in, where your standard of living is the same as the standard of living as Caesar's was 2,000 years ago.
Thanks, boomers.
It's phenomenal. The problem is that we're so surrounded by wealth, is that we're all kind of seduced by it. And so if you read lists of sins from 2,000 years ago, the beginning of the church, and these are the sins of the elite, these are all the sins that we commit. It's really interesting. So we've entered into this sort of the psychology of the super wealthy. You don't think you're super wealthy. You just think you're you. But we just sort of, so we're so programmed about being happy. I must be happy now. Right now I have to be happy. That just changes everything. And then when you add another person into that, like, we have to be happy. Or actually, even if sometimes people get into relationships and they don't even do we, they just go, this person must make me happy now. And when they don't, then just... So I first noticed all of this was a problem actually in high school, because I was a super nerd in high school, like super nerd, right? And so rather than getting involved in all of the dating and stuff like that, I just sort of sat back and kind of watched. And I was amazed the frequency with which guys and girls dated, a couple of weeks, a couple of months, somewhat longer, and invariably the relationships ended with these explosive, angry, I hate your guts, you're the worst person in the world, I'm going to destroy your reputation, I'm going to ruin all your friends. I'm standing there going, yeesh, there must be something wrong if this is like a normal experience. Now, I'm sure it's not like that anymore. I'm sure people date and they end and it's very peaceful and calm, right? Right, it's way better. Please don't disillusion me. No one's learned anything. All right, so that was when I kind of sat back and went, something's wrong. This can't be the way it's supposed to be. And so it was actually, let's say when I was 16, that I actually started really consciously thinking about what relationships should entail and shouldn't entail. And one of the things that I ran across kind of along the way was this idea that people are just sort of lost. That's why these first two questions are so interesting, because the world says, head over there, go cross the highway blindfolded and you'll be fine. Right? And God and the church say, there's a highway, can you use the bridge? Or go under the underpass or something, because there are cars and you'll be dead soon. And so that then relates to the next two questions. The next one is, this is actually something that was specifically discussed in the developmental psych part of it, is what's the biological purpose of adolescence? What's it? Why are you? What's the purpose of being a teenager?
To become an adult.
Well, yes, except the problem with that is that there are 1,000 versions of adulthood. So yes, with one big exception.
I have no idea what that would be.
See, behind the mask. Yes.
Mature,
Pardon?
mature, like mentally and physically mature.
Yes, that's a more sophisticated way of saying what he said. That was good. But I need more.
To prepare to be?
No. Well, you already answered. Yes.
Would it be, where am I right?
sort of preparing to be parents in the future, and learning how to live and interact in the world with the opposite sex in preparation for that sort of?
Right, but we shouldn't say sort of, because you've all studied biology at some level or another, okay? The maturation of all plants and of all animals, fundamental to the maturation is the ability to reproduce. It's really simple. It's really simple. So when they go from being the kid version of an oak tree or a lion or a bear or a fish or whatever, to the adult version, what marks the fact that they've now entered into the adult phase is that they can reproduce. Well, we're not any different. And the funny thing is, again, if I could take you into the time machine, transport you to 100 years ago, everyone would be exactly on top of the purpose of adulthood is to be married and have kids. That's what it's about. No one would even question it. No one would. And the reason why today we're like, well, we're not really sure is, and this is a whole long discussion which I don't want to get into, was because of the invention of the birth control pill. Where it's possible for couples to have relations and not have kids. And that just totally did this mind-bending thing that now people think that the purpose of relationships is to be happy. Right? Which means if you're not serving my narcissistic desire, something's wrong with this, and there's no higher purpose. And so when I've done marriage preparation in the suburbs, I don't know why the suburbs are over there. What direction is that?
The suburbs.
The suburbs. Or am I pointing at West Virginia?
I think
No, that's West Virginia, right?
No, West Virginia.
There's no suburbs over here.
West Virginia. Good. That is the suburb. That is the suburb.
Yeah.
All right. I spent 25 years doing marriage preparation over there. And most of the time when we were talking about marriage and getting married and getting ready to get married, the last thing they talked about was, oh yeah, we might want to have kids too. And you're like, what? It was so foreign to their normal experience. Whereas the last 5 years of doing marriage preparation out here in the valley, at the college, everybody understands getting married and having kids go hand in hand. Now, there's some discussion about timing, but the idea that it's sort of even a question, it's not even a question out here. It's almost like different planets, doing marriage preparation there and doing marriage preparation here.
Welcome to the Shenandoah Valley.
The Shenandoah Valley, I love it out here. Right. And so that's why that question is there, because now culturally, so I saw an article yesterday getting ready for this talk, that the average age across the country that girls start to date is around 12 and a half, and the average age that guys start to date is 13. Okay? And with all the conditions about parents and culture and society and blah, 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 all that stuff. But the natural interest of guys and girls on guys goes hand in hand with adolescence, teenage years, puberty, whatever term we want to use. It's all about God's basically waking you up and saying, what I have in mind for you is I want you to be able to have children. And where that actually applies, even to my life, is because if the desire to be married and the desire to have children didn't mean anything, then celibacy would mean nothing. Whereas, so anytime I've talked to guys and said, well, you ever thought about the priesthood? And they're like, yeah, well, he's like, yeah, well, I like girls and I want to have kids. I'm like, that makes you normal and healthy? Because if you don't like girls and don't want to have kids, then the priesthood's not the right decision. So celibacy is supposed to be a sacrifice. It really is. And so all of that goes together. And so, whereas if you don't understand that, then you enter into adolescence with this just sort of chaotic, what's the purpose of this life? You know, is it like just being a larger version of being a kid? Is it a larger, more complicated version of being a kid? It's way more interesting and way worse than being a kid. And that's part of the culture. The culture isn't really clear, like, okay, so if you were all Aborigines, so young Aborigine men and women, sort of in the outback of Australia, you know, you would have these rituals that would prepare you to transition from being a boy to being a man and from being a girl to being a woman. And it would be very clear, this is what we're doing. Here in the West, it's so weird. It's one of the reasons why it's so hard, is because it's so weird and there's no direction and there are all these different versions of it.
Yeah, do you want to bring the kids inside?
But the biology is really simple. You're being prepared to be parents. That's why you're going through all the changes. That's why the way you look at yourself and look at life is different. It's all part of preparing to become parents. Whether you end up becoming parents or not, we're all supposed to be able to do it. The next two questions, what happens when I let my feelings control my thoughts, and what happens when I let my feelings run my life? Somebody new? Bueller? You don't even know what that means. Yes?
You become confused. Like your thoughts become confused and stuff.
If your feelings control your thoughts.
Yeah.
Well, kind of. I mean, does anyone speak in favor of having our feelings run our thoughts? Advocate for it?
That.
It's very exciting. Go ahead. Yes?
I put this in a bus.
Well, you could put any vice there. Couldn't you?
Emotional damage.
Yes?
There's always destruction and pain in some way. Like relationships fall apart, or you follow the wrong path, or you suffer pain because you're not doing what you should be doing.
So, I'm going to close my eyes because I don't want to know. I don't want to know. And you should all close your eyes too. But then if all of our eyes closed, we can't see what you're going to do. But I would kind of like a show of hands, and you have to keep this here. How many of you at some point along the way have thought that what your parents are saying or doing or want you to do is just really stupid? Okay. Right. I assume your parents are not monsters. Right?
Close enough.
But that's part of the letting our feelings control our thoughts. Because even if they're wrong, they care about you. Yes?
I feel like the media also tries to put feelings above thoughts, even with Star Wars and trust your feelings and things like that.
Oh, the whole force thing? Yes. Yes.
It's a very subtle way of introducing the idea of, just being rash and that.
Well, about 30 years ago, I think it was 30 years ago or so, maybe it was with The Little Mermaid, the Disney movie, is when Disney began the active campaign to present adults as stupid and all wisdom resides in children.
Yeah.
Right? And we've now had decades of adults are stupid. So you're preparing for stupid. This is as wise as you will ever be. No, that's not true. It's so funny. It's so funny. So if having our thoughts run our feelings is a mistake, then having our feelings run our lives is even worse. And having your feelings run your life can be very exciting. Yes, sir?
Let's call it the Democratic Party.
No,
I
didn't say that, yeah.
But
No politics.
I'm not doing politics right now.
Yeah.
So that's a whole other discussion. So there is something very exciting about having our feelings run our decision making, but it's rapidly super disastrous. But it's hard to fight against it. And the thing is, the reason why those questions are there is because as you enter into a romantic relationship with a person, whatever you feel more intensely. And so it's really, really, really hard in the middle of a relationship, especially at the beginning of one where there's the crush and there's the embarrassment and you're excited to be around them and you can't say anything and they can't say anything and everybody gets all stupid and you make googly eyes at each other. Right. Other than you, not you. Those people out there have this problem. Right. It's very hard not to have our feelings be in charge. And we end up saying things and doing things that are just colossally stupid. Right, and I don't even have to say sinful because if we're going down the road of stupid, we'll go down the road of sinful. Really simple, number 4. Why are members of the opposite sex attracted to each other? So that there's a possibility of
Children.
making babies. Right, very simple. Okay, and then that actually then goes hand in hand with 5 and 6. So the difficulty with same-sex attraction is that the person you're romantically interested in, you actually can't biologically make a child with. And so the romance, this is where the feelings are super intense. But if I let these feelings run my life, my life's not going to be fulfilled the way it can and should be fulfilled. The same thing with if I have a sense in myself that I'm the wrong gender and that needs to be changed. The problem is that if I'm running my life, again, according to how I feel, ultimately there's only chaos. And we don't, in any other aspect of life, we don't say, well, whatever you feel, that's probably right. No, our feelings are intense. We have to take them seriously. But we never let our feelings run our life. And yet the culture is a totally different view of this, because the culture is all about be happy now, don't let anybody take happiness away from you. you know, without actually dealing with all the consequences that go with that. So number 7, why do men pay special attention to a woman's figure? Biologically. So assuming we've been on the planet for about 250,000 years, they've done DNA studies or genetic studies. Supposedly the original Eve, the original woman, was alive about 250,000 years ago. So we've been on the planet for about 250,000 years. So we've had 250,000 years of being guided by God for men to find women's figures interesting. Why are men supposed to find women's figures interesting? Somebody else? No. No words from you. No, Sue. Yes, sir.
To see if she can have children.
Fertility. It's all about fertility. It's really simple. Now, here's the really interesting thing. This is the psychology part that I hadn't realized before I did some more reading, is that it's not only that men are interested in women's figures, but women are interested in women's figures. So it's not only that men objectify women, women objectify women. Why do women objectify women? Why do women notice other women's figures? No, you said something. Yes?
To make sure that we're good looking to attract a mate to have children.
Right, and you can put it more brutally than that. Competition. Right, she's the competition. Right. And so, unfortunately, everybody objectifies women, which means all of us suffer from some version, or attempted to suffer from some version, of not treating women like they're people, but instead either treating them as an object of desire or an object of competition, which is a problem, because women really are people. It's not like there are men who are people, and then there are women who are the objects of all this weird stuff. Everybody's people. Let's see. If you cheated, you would know the answer to this question. What do men first notice when looking at a woman?
I said face. I said face too.
Face.
Hair. I would probably say hair.
Hair.
Eyes and hair.
Hair. So if there was a study done in England of young adults, the British do some really interesting psychological studies, and what they came back with, overwhelmingly, the first thing men notice in women is their hair. It's fascinating.
What?
Yeah. So
Wait, could you repeat that?
the first thing that men notice in women is their hair. Yeah. Let's see. What trait do women especially appreciate in a man?
Courage.
I'd say
Courage.
Strength.
I said it.
Sense of humor.
That's what I said.
Laughter.
As soon as I saw the answer.
Yes, sir.
That's right.
Strength and humor. Right. That's the line from almost the line from Gladiator.
what?
Strength and honor.
Oh,
Sorry. Supposedly it's a sense of humor. Overwhelmingly. Right. Women like a guy who can make them laugh. Which is not really deep. Sorry. I mean, I'm not really impressed by that. But whatever. The one actually advantage to it is that if he can make her laugh, it means he's paying attention to her. Right? He's actually listening to her, because a lot of times a lot of our jokes are really terrible. I mean, maybe you guys are much funnier than I am. But if you pay attention, that makes her laugh, that doesn't make her laugh. So there's actually this interpersonal element to it. And what trait do men especially appreciate in a woman?
Goodness.
Goodness,
Beauty.
beauty, fashion,
Someone to talk to.
someone to talk to.
More less likely actually paying attention.
Yeah, men are kind of, yes, sir?
Someone who thinks the jokes are actually funny.
Someone who they might be humoring you, so you don't know. Overwhelmingly, it seems to be men like a woman who will listen to them, because, and with men I say this with all due respect, we are hopeless narcissists, and we love to talk about whatever we love to talk about, you know? So we can all nerd out on something, okay? And to have a woman who will listen to us while we're nerding out on whatever we're nerding out on, she has to sit there with her eyes looking at us and listening, and by the time we're done going blah, 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 about blah, 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 we're also thinking, this is the greatest girl in the world. And she's like, he's the most boring guy we've seen. It's hilarious. We're hilarious. Let's see. Which parent generally contributes more in the formation of our gender identity, our moms or our dads?
Probably dad.
Dads. Now,
Well, my dad was
for all of
so-
you men here, this is why this matters to you, right? Your relation, assuming you get married and have kids, your relationship with your kids is hugely important. So there's good documentation that the single thing that is most likely to help a child succeed in school is the dad's interest in the kid's education at home. Not the dad's interest in the kid in the school, but when the dad is actively interested in the child's education. And so this is actually kind of a problem out here where there's this huge homeschooling community. And overwhelmingly, homeschooling tends to get dumped on moms. And it's not that the moms necessarily feel dumped on, they may well readily embrace it. But that doesn't give dad an excuse to say, well, mom's taking care of it. If he's really concerned about how well his children are doing, when he's got to be actively engaged in their education. There was also a really interesting study done out in Southern California, like over 5 generations. So they had several thousand participants, and it was about faith formation. And so they talked to Jews, Mormons, mainline Protestants, evangelicals, did I say Mormons? Catholics, and then those were called nuns who had no relationship, not nuns like habits with nuns, but nuns like no religion. That was funny, you even laughed. That was worse. That was funny. And what they did was they basically studied to see from generation to generation which groups most successfully handed on the faith to the children after them. And what are the conditions in which the faith was handed on. And what they found for the Catholics was that the 2 most important factors that would predict whether or not a young adult Catholic is going to practice their faith is first that their dad practices the faith, and second that they're certain that their dad loves them. And so my general conclusion, I can't prove this, is that what moms do for us is moms give us a foundation of people. Without our relationship with our mom, we're lost as people. Our basic identity is in trouble. And then once so dad needs to be really encouraging of everything mom is doing, especially during the first 6 years. This is like the Maria Montessori, 0 to 6, 6 to 12, 12 to 18, 18 to 24. There are these 4 what are called planes of development. Mom lays the foundation. And then dad has to run with the foundation that mom has laid, because dad then helps the children engage the world and things in the world. A lot of dads don't know that. And they somehow think parenting is somehow more of a mom thing. And so kids miss out. And so, especially guys, right? When you think in terms of marriage, think in terms of being dads. And ladies, when you're deciding who to date and who's interesting, one of the really things you need to look at is he going to be a good father for my kids? It's hugely important. And you can never just sort of skip that part of it. Let's see. But did God always plan for men and women to have kids, or is that from the original sin? Always. Always. How long ago did modern dating begin? Thousands of years ago.
About 100 years. That's pretty modern.
20 years ago. That's like super modern. We're dating was 20 years ago.
Approximately 100, a little closer to 120.
About 100 years ago, things shifted. Before then, there was what was called the period when the gentleman caller would come and you'd have the guys coming and meet the girl and her family, and they would sort of decide. Yes, sir?
Courting.
Courting was kind of before that too. In the English tradition, English-German tradition, there really weren't arranged marriages for the last couple of 100 years. But it was really right around the Roaring 20s, and so there was this explosion of drinking and all this. Everything in the United States shifted. That's when dating began to become normal. But after World War I, okay, and after World War II, dating was way simpler. Guy met a girl met a guy, they liked each other, they kind of enjoyed each other's company, they both have 10 fingers and 10 toes, they have basically sort of compatible moral systems, they kind of enjoyed each other's company, and they would figure that all out in a couple of months and get married. That was it. They'd meet each other's families, everybody was Christian back then. Now, what I will simply warn you now, I'll wave my giant yellow flag at all of you. When couples come for marriage preparation, if they've been dating 5 years, almost guarantee you they have problems. They're almost all like old married couples already. Because Young dating couples are excited to be with each other, and they'll change for each other, and they'll adjust for each other, and it's really cool the dynamics that can occur. Couples that have been dating for 5 years, they're already tired of each other. They already have these bad old habits, and you're like, come on, aren't you excited about marrying them? Well, kind of, we've been doing it so long. You're like, so it shouldn't take that long to figure out. It shouldn't. I figure couples should date about 1.5 years. It takes at least a year. You need to go through the whole year. You need to see the other person at their worst. So, because somewhere along the way in your married life, they're going to be at their worst. So you need to make sure that you can deal with the worst. Because everybody, see, part of the problem with dating, this is just a general comment, part of the problem with dating is that dating is based on a lie, okay? Because you work really, really hard to be your best self. And you're like, how long can I keep this up? You know? And then, like, the real you peeks through. And then you're terrified, are they going to leave me because they saw that I'm not perfect all the time. But dating's the only system we got. I assume you don't want to go back to arranged marriages? You don't want that? Right. So the only system we have is dating. You need to work dating as best as you can. But it has all sorts of challenges with it. How long ago did romance appear in literature?
1,000. About 1,000.
It's actually, and go ahead.
2,000 years ago?
That's the oldest thing I gave you. It actually goes back further than that. It's in Greek literature. There's references to romance. So it makes sense that as long as we've been writing and there's been literature and men and women are interested in each other, we write about it. The thing is that for most of the history of the Western civilization, it wasn't the central feature of life. Because there were all sorts of other things going on. Who was the first married couple? Adam and Eve. Who was the best married couple? Mary and Joseph. Thank you very much. I am done with my work. Right. Now, number 21 is not the teaching of the church. It's just sort of what I've seen over the years that seems to make sense. And one of the reasons why couples seem to mess up is because they get the order wrong, or why relationship ends explosively is because they got the order wrong. So let's just start with number 1. What's the very, very first item at the very, very beginning of a relationship?
Getting acquainted.
Getting acquainted, right? Now, that just seems so intuitively obvious that you can yawn and go to sleep at this point. However, we live in a culture that as you enter further into adolescence and enter into young adulthood, we live in a culture where hooking up is seen as just totally acceptable. Where you have two people who get together who haven't even gotten acquainted, they drink too much, and then they're with each other in bed. It's utterly disastrous. And besides sinful. But it's disastrous in terms of the wounds to both the men and the women. So the idea that you're actually going to talk to the other person, okay, which is a problem because that was another study done. I think there's also a British study. I love the British, they're so cool. Right? It was also a study of high school students, British high school students, and they were given the option of if you could communicate with your friends by text or by talking, which would you prefer?
I like talking.
Overwhelmingly, they said texting.
They're not using it.
All right, you all are weird. I'll just say that because you like to talk to each other. You're super weirdos. You're really good weirdos. You're really good weirdos. But you probably have friends who have, or if you haven't had friends yet and had this experience, you will have friends who have this experience, where relationships are ended by texts. It's horrifying. Or couples have arguments with each other via text, right? Text messaging should only be to convey the simplest information of, here I am, here's what I'm doing, baby, here's my address, here's my phone number, here's the dessert that I'm eating, and that's it. No emotional information should ever be conveyed by a text message because it can't convey a text message. And any text, does this even go back to ancient email? Now email is ancient, right? No writing, no digital writing can successfully convey emotions. And it will always be interpreted in the worst possible way. This is also true at work. Okay? Part of when I was a pastor, one of my policies is that you can never criticize another colleague via email. If you have something critical to say to another employee at the parish, you have to go talk to them. And if you can't talk to them, you at least have to communicate with them on the phone. But you never give bad news or challenging news by any digital means, any electronic means, because it's always going to be it's always going to be interpreted as we're being yelled at and they hate us. And so even people who like to talk to each other, there's still this great temptation of, I'll just solve this problem with a text message. No, that's not solving a problem, that's being a coward. Because we really do have to talk to each other. So getting acquainted, as stupid as it is, it really is the first step of actually taking the time with someone to talk to them. I'm not going to walk you through all of these, okay? It's something that's worth discussing among yourselves or discussing with your parents. But two big things in there that I found, one of the biggest mistakes people make is they don't take the time to form friendships. Because if a guy and a girl are actually friends, that can have a lifetime value even if the romance thing doesn't work. But if all you have is romance and the romance ends, it generally is just painful and miserable. Friendship is hard work. But to take the time to actually become friends, right, there are countless benefits that come from that. That's the first. The second is that what I had on my list in terms of order, let's see, mutual interest, friendship, improving your prayer. Oh yeah, this is actually two things. One is that as soon as you begin to have a relationship, even a friendship with another person, your prayer life should improve a little bit so that the relationship isn't selfish. So as you make steps forward in a relationship with someone, we should be closer to God because the way we're designed is we always follow our heart. And if this person is more important to me than God, right, then it's one of the reasons why my moral life collapses. So having a healthy relationship with another person and having a healthy relationship with God really go together because God keeps me focused. And then I'm less likely to be selfish, I'm less likely to let my feelings run my life, I'm less likely to take advantage of the other person. But if I don't have the God thing in order, right, well then it's just my feelings and their feelings with all the chaos that goes with it. The other one was, that I threw in here just to be as difficult as possible, is how early on I had meeting the other person's family. So again, if you go back 100 years, there's no relationship without meeting the other person's family. So as much as your friends love you, your family loves you more. That's a pretty general, safe statement. And so the way I was raised, because I have to admit, I was friends with my parents in high school. And the friends that I had, both when I was in high school and then when I was dating in college and then even the seminarians that I got to know, one of the things that I always fun was to bring them home because I wanted them to meet mom and dad. Because I liked my mom and dad, and I liked my friends, or I liked my freshman girlfriend, I liked my sophomore girlfriend. I wanted them to meet my parents because I want all the people that I know and like each other to get to know each other. That won't happen if you don't take the time to bring whoever your friends are, or if there is someone that you really like, right? If your parents have to fight with you to meet them, something's wrong. And then if that relationship is in order, then also having whoever it is that's who's special in your life, having them meet your friends. Because the advantage that your parents have and your friends have is that they're not in love with this other person or in like with this other person. And as soon as we I really like them, our brain's kind of short, and our ability to make good judgments kind of fritzes. And so you want your friends to be able to pull you aside after the whole group of you have gone to a movie or the whole group of you have gone and done something, and afterwards they pull you aside and go, you're a little weird around them. Or they can say to you, they're not very nice to you. Which, because you really like them, you don't notice that. Because when you really like them, everything they say and do is okay. And ideally, you have a relationship with your parents that your parents are allowed to say that stuff too. And then you get to stand back and go, what am I missing? Or what am I just not seeing? But at the same token, if your friends really like your other friends and your parents really like them, that's often a really good sign. So the whole dating thing is not something you're supposed to do. We're not supposed to do it by ourselves. It really should be, in many ways, a group and a family project. And even though it may be slower and feel awkward, it's way safer and it's way healthier. But like I said, I'm not going to go through that whole list. I just think it's worth looking at. Preguntas mías, amigos. Is that good? Sir? Yes.
What age would you say is it would be appropriate to start a dating relationship?
If the dating relationship means there's someone I really like and I bring them home to have activities with me and my family, oh, that could be theoretically as early as 8th or 9th grade. Because it's with your family. You know. If you're not comfortable with the family thing, that creates huge difficulties. Because apparently even groups of teenagers going out together are more than capable of getting themselves in trouble. You know, just because, oh, it's a group date, oh, it'll be okay. No, it won't. Because they'll individually all go be disastrous. So, yes?
At most, how long do you think couples should date?
You mean how long should they date before what?
Getting engaged.
Well, I mean, like I said, if they hit the 5-year mark, they're in trouble.
Okay.
Now, always 100%? No. Generally, yes. Generally, right. Something's,
Okay. So less than 5 years.
generally, yes.
Okay. I want to be at least
So, you want to be 102?
No, what? No.
Oh, 1 or 2. I thought you said you wanted to be at least 102 before you date, and I thought, well, yeah. That's a long, lonely life you're going to be living. Okay, no, I'm ready. Right, sorry.
Go ahead. How long into the relationship would you recommend for like introducing them to like your parents or something? Like
As soon as you're interested in them.
As soon?
As soon as they matter to you. If they matter to you, I'm assuming your parents matter to you. Don't answer that question. Right. I'm assuming your relationship with your parents is pretty healthy. And if it's pretty healthy, don't say anything. No confessions. Shh. Shut up. Sorry. Assuming it's pretty healthy, then anybody who's a friend, like even just a friend, why wouldn't you bring them home to meet your family? You would. Right. So having to meet the family is not supposed to be a big deal. It's supposed to be a normal thing you do. Like the people that are most important to me, well, I want them to meet my family. And I want my family to meet them. Then they know the weird family I come from. It would be great. Because they'll understand me. Right. Not you, though. Those other people. Yes, ma'am.
I saw group dating was in the list before, like, knowing that you're romantically attracted. Like, what does group dating mean?
Maybe going to a movie together. Maybe going to...
You mean like
You and that person.
couples who are seeing each other going in a group, like multiple couples, or everyone going in a group and it's just friends and you're interested in other people?
Either. Somewhere you have to figure out, do I like this person?
Oh, yeah.
See, there's like, where I'm interested in you, that's like the first step.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Which is the most weird, awkward stage. Then there is, I need to figure out, do I like you? Well, that takes time, okay? All right? And then once I figured out I like you, then I have to figure out if they like me. And if we like each other, that's the beginning of romance, is I like you and you like me. Because that's more emotionally charged than we're just friends.
Right.
Friends don't have to say we're friends. Friends are friends. But if I like you and you like me, those words need to be said. And I need to own it, and it's like super scary. It's great, and it's terrible.
So it's more of like a behind the scenes internally. I want to hang out with this person in a group setting more.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Because
Right.
it kind of sounded like, okay, we're all interested in different people.
That could work too. That could be fine. No, I mean, this social reality that I'd never heard of before I got to Christendom of friend groups. I'd never heard of a friend group before in my life.
Wow.
Right, you can have friend groups that are just going wherever, and I don't know necessarily who's interested in whom and who isn't, and so, yes.
This is a little unrelated, but how do you help someone who's like very desperate to date and you're not trying to tell them like work on yourself or whatever? I don't know.
One is I would find out where the desperation is coming from, and then theoretically they lack a degree of self-confidence, and so it's always easy. I mean, with any human problem, I try to help people focus on what they can control. So I can't make someone interested in me, but I can be interested in whatever I'm interested in. And the world we live in is so diverse. The phrase I actually use on campus is you should just embrace your inner nerd. Whatever you're really nerdy about, nerd out on it, because you're going to find other people that are equally nerdy. And invariably, there are guys and girls that will nerd out on the same thing. Those are natural couples, right? But if I focus on meeting the right person, all right, it's so superficial. Whereas if I focus on what I'm really interested in, and I find somebody else who's really interested in it, it's phenomenal. It can be phenomenal. Because you can control that. Does that kind of, yeah. Yes?
What do you think is like the best age for somebody to get married?
The best age. Well, I'll tell you this, that when people 40 or older, or 35 or older date, they're so much better at it than you guys. You guys are terrible at dating.
Emotions.
No, I mean with respect, because they're so self-confident. They know what they want, they know what they're going to be like, they're put together as people, they cut right through the whatever, can't say on camera, right? It works or it doesn't work. Marriage preparation is so simple. Oh, they're delightful. Like again, mid-30s to older, they are phenomenal to do marriage preparation with because they're so together. Whereas when you're younger, you're a disaster. You don't know what you want. You don't know yourself very well, and your brains are still forming. So here, I'll use you as an example. So like right up here, no, it's not a Zen moment. Right. So right up here is the prefrontal cortex. This is the executive function of the brain. This is where you make hard decisions, right? This is the last part of the brain to develop. I don't mean in you. I mean in all of you. Right. And it doesn't finish developing until you're about 24, 25. Right. So you're still an ongoing changing person because the neurological development of the brain is changing. Now that doesn't mean that people who are younger than 25 can get married. They can, because then part of their experience of being married is fully entering into adulthood together and fully entering into having an adult brain together, which can be really cool. So just really quickly, so the Christendom couples whose marriage prep I do, they have ideals, but they don't have a lot of life experience. But because they have ideals, they have guiding principles, which enables them to do it really well. What people in the world have is lots of life experience, but they don't have ideals, which means they've been through incredibly painful, sinful circumstances often, and they have tons and tons of wounds. I think the risk of the young and ideal is better than life experience with tons of wounds and sins.
So you'd say it's better to get married younger?
If you have ideals.
Okay.
The demographics are,
So like among Catholics?
well, the demographics are if you're young and uneducated, the marriage probably won't last. So the highest divorce rate is for people who get married young and they're uneducated and relatively poor. Right, they're in the greatest danger of getting divorced. Those are the demographics. Those are pretty old demographics too. You know.
Who are the least in danger?
If you have morals, education, and money. I mean, those all go together. Right. So there's no reason not to be hopeful about a marriage succeeding. You have every reason to have confidence and have hope, even if maybe what you've seen or heard of in other families hasn't gone really well.
And that also has to do with like the actual relationship itself too, right? Like isn't there higher divorce rates for like if they've lived together before getting married?
Yes.
If they've slept together and lived together before they're married, they tend to run into more difficulties. Yes, that's part of it too. So it's funny in terms of statistics of like successful marriages. The single thing that seems to be correlated, the two things that seem to be correlated with successful marriages, one is worship together on Sundays. The divorce rate plummets for the couples that are going to church together. And it's not, I'd love to say it's just Catholic. It's not Catholic. Anybody, any church. If you go to church every Sunday, you know, and that's why if you have Protestant friends, you want to encourage them to go to church. Really, take time with Jesus. The divorce rate really, really plummets. And couples that use natural family planning, the divorce rate is down to like 4% or something like that. It's fascinating. It's fascinating. Está bien? In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women. Blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. God bless you, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Thank you.